Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you by St. Luke's On Demand Virtual Care, which allows patients to see a provider from their home using a computer or smartphone with on demand care for common ailments such as a cough, sore throat, or a sinus issue. More information at stlukesonline.org. From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. You're listening to Idaho Matters. Last February, the Idaho legislature and Governor Brad Little passed a new charter school law which encourages the advancement of innovative approaches. This, according to the Public Charter Commission's director. Now, this new law provides a faster track for new charter schools to get started. It's designed to add to the more than 70 charter schools already teaching 30,000 kids here in Idaho, which, according to Idaho Ed News, represents almost 10% of all school-age students here in our state. In August, the first new school to come forward under the new law got conditional approval by the Idaho Public Charter School Commission. Bribon bills itself as Idaho's first public school of sport, and it plans to teach kids in grades K through 8 at a school in Nampa. Now, this approval came with some conditions, including securing a building for the school and finding funding as well as transportation, all of which Brandon Durst, the chairman of Bribon Academy, is confident that it can be done. Now, Durst might sound like a familiar name because he served in the Idaho legislature. He also worked on the Advanced Opportunities Program. He's also worked as an analyst for the Idaho Freedom Foundation, and he was appointed superintendent of the West Bonner School District 2 years ago before he was forced out for not having a superintendent's license. Now, since Bribon's approval, Durst has been very busy. He has been out speaking with school board trustees in the Treasure Valley, and he's been working to secure a brick and mortar building for the school. Now, because this is the very first charter approved under the new law, we wanted to find out more about the school. So we took Brandon Durst up on his offer to come on the program and talk more about this. Brandon, really nice to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Gemma.
So I want to start with the school itself, if we could. Now, this would be a tuition-free public charter school, and you are billing it as Idaho's first public school of sport. So can you talk about how really PE, physical education, is the basis of this school, if I'm understanding this correctly?
Yeah, so the Bribon Academy would be Idaho's first public school of sport, and frankly, what could be the first public school of sport in the country. And what it is really the idea behind a school of sport is to really integrate athletics and physical development into every single thing that happens inside of the school. And so it ranges from having an hour of daily PE to making sure that sports teams are integral to what each student does as a part of their participation in the school. It really just changes the focus. So if you think about it in terms of like an art school or a music school or a STEM school, they have their focuses that they have for their students, and we're no different. We just focus on sports and on physical development.
Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit more about that because as you were describing this, it kind of reminded me of the Idaho Fine Arts Academy, right? And this is an art school that very much incorporates the arts into the academics. So if people are familiar with other charter schools, a lot of them do have these particular focuses. So is that kind of the idea behind this? It's just that you're wanting to focus on more of that physical education aspect.
Yeah, so we see students throughout our community who excel in athletics and who may not have access to top level training or coaching to be able to focus on the thing that they think that they're good at or they want to be good at. And so, or just frankly, may just interest them. So what we're saying is here's an opportunity for these kids who may not have access otherwise to come to school that cares about the things they care about and are going to be investing in them to make them better at those things. So if you look at like the Fine Arts Academy, the one that I look at nationally that I point to the most often is the LaGuardia School of Music and Art, which is based in New York City. It's a public charter school or a public school in the in New York City School District. High-end school. It attracts some of the very best and brightest at that particular thing. And we want to be able to do the same thing for students here in Idaho that can't maybe whose families can't afford to go and pay for, $5,000 a year for club sports, but their
Hmm.
student still deserves the opportunity to be able to, get as good as they possibly can and maximize their own potential for within the athletic realm.
So, how much of the school day would be dedicated to athletics versus academics? And how would you ensure things like test scores and core learning don't suffer?
Yeah, so to be a good athlete, you need to be a good student first and foremost, right? So we know that when students excel in the classroom, they can excel on the court, on the field, on the track, wherever they do their sports. And so what we do is number one, we require an hour of PE every single day for every student. And there's no exception to that. Every student has to do that. Um, and that's part of, integrating our we call it our three pillars of our school. One of those pillars is physical development and athletics. We want to make sure that students are doing that. We also want to make sure that we're integrating sports into our curriculum as well. So if you're thinking about it from like a CTE, curricular education standpoint, sports management or sports training, sports medicine, that sort of thing, those things can be integrated into your otherwise traditional um, core subjects so that they're still continually
Hmm.
focused on sports because that's what the students are there to learn about. We don't want to see our grades and our scores suffer. And in fact, we made the audacious claim to the Public Charter Commission that we were going to focus on getting a 90% proficiency rate for our students in those core subjects. And the reason is because we believe that discipline in sports needs to be reflected in discipline in academics as well. And so
Hmm.
we have got systems in place to monitor growth within our student body academically and athletically. And we want to make sure that both those things are being given the appropriate amount of attention so they're not being neglected so they can continue to improve and grow.
So, I want to talk a little bit more about the athletics part of this. And I understand this is just a K through 8 school. And you mentioned like these travel teams, right? These club sports, which really they seem to start younger and younger these days. And there really is, in my opinion, as a parent, kind of a have and have nots of kids that can do travel sports, who can do club sports because of the cost, right? And so then when they get to high school, if you've, and a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times, if you haven't had this opportunity, you don't even make the high school team. So
Yeah.
how are you going to make sure that if these kids really do want to be these well-rounded athletes, how are they going to be able to jump then to a high school that is highly competitive in sports and guarantee that these kids are going to make those high school teams, right? Because if they have aspirations to go collegiate, um, they're going to have to be able to play at the high school level. And again, I think there's an argument to be made of even at high school, there's a have and have not. If you have not been in these sports. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me there's a few answers to that question. So the first piece is, we're opening K-8, but we are adding high school, 1 year of high school each year thereafter. So we do intend to have a full K-12 school within 5 years. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there is a have and have nots, and that's actually one of the reasons that I wanted to start the school in the first place. I remember being in high school and really, really wanting to go to the IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. And my
Mm-hmm.
family was low income, and there was no way in God's green earth that we were going to be able to afford to do that. And it really put me at a disadvantage. And there is there is a lot to be said for access in sports, and a lack of access can have a real huge impact on your ability to maximize your potential. And so, one of the things that, and this is an indirect answer to your question, Gemma, but one of the things that we really have a target for is to have 50% of our student body population be on free or reduced price lunch and be in a minority population. And so part of that goal is to really look at these kids who, by no fault of their own, will likely never be in a situation where they could afford to get access to the kind of training and coaching that they would need to have to be able to live out their collegiate aspirations. And so we also look at this as kind of a generational endeavor, right? Like as these students matriculate into the high school and continue to get the coaching that's going to help prepare them and maximize their potential, they will be able to get into places that they would otherwise maybe not been able to, and be able to really be able to change the dynamics within their own communities that they have and help
Hmm.
improve them too. And so we're just trying to say, hey, here's this opportunity for you. We want you to take advantage of this. It doesn't cost anything. We're here and we actually want those students to be a part of our school so that they can reach the dreams that they have, and we want to help them get there.
So, well, my understanding is you want to keep classes small, like a 15-to-1 student to adult ratio. Um,
Yep.
how is that going to then impact high school when you said in 5 years you want to have a full high school? And I ask this question based solely on athletics. We'll talk about the academics in a second, because if you have a small high school, you're not going to be at that, Division 6, right? Or Division 5. You're gonna be one of the smaller schools. So you're not going to be able to compete at the same level as some of these kids that go to these larger schools and frankly are getting scouted by colleges. And I mean, there seems to be that there's going to be a bigger uphill battle for your school to get these kids in front of these recruits. And what about like the level of coaches and all of that you can potentially bring in with a smaller school?
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. So there's three things to that. Number one, um, we're going to be hiring a full-time year-round sporting director, which is different than an athletic director. The sporting director will report to the charter administrator, which we're going to be calling our headmaster. That'll be in the basically a deputy level position. They work year-round to work with college recruitment, with coach recruitment, coaching's training, and the whole 9 yards. So that's number one. Number two, kind of taking your questions in reverse order, our
Hmm.
coaches. The way our budget is set up is we're set up to be able to pay 20 to 25% more for our coaches than any other school in the Treasure Valley on a per stipend basis. So we'll be able to attract coaches that are um, and be able to pay them commensurate with their ability, which is not something that other traditional public schools can do at this point. And a lot of our private schools have a struggle at doing as well. And so that'll help us be able to attract and retain better coaching. Your question about the IHSAA classification systems, you mentioned the 6A, the 5A, and so
Yeah.
forth. It is our intention to be able to go in at 6A. Even though our school is
Hmm.
smaller, you're allowed to the bylaws and the guidelines with that organization allow schools that are smaller to petition to play at a higher level. And that's exactly what we intend to do. Because you're right, if we're not playing at that higher level, it will be a significant disadvantage to our student athletes. And so um, we also believe that we're going to attract a lot of players that are at a very high level, and so we want them to be able to be competing against other players at a high level. And then in addition to that, in the off season, um, and we're still working on the exact mechanics on how this is going to work out, we want to be playing out of state and playing in the off season in Idaho, which was the on season for a lot of these other high schools in our surrounding states like Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Utah, where they play their sports in a different season than we do, so we can get access to those high level competitions and also get eyeballs on our kids by recruits who are watching those other high schools.
How are you going to pay for that if you're going to be traveling out of state? How's that going to work within the
So part of our budget,
within the
yeah,
cost?
we've got to budget it in. It's about, it's about looking at what's the purpose of our school, right? Why do we
Hmm.
exist? We obviously exist to get students a quality education. That's first and foremost, right? That's why we have an education system in the first place. But then another equally important part of that for us is to be able to give students an access to athletic opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't have. And so we're just, where your budget lies is where your priorities are, right? And so we're prioritizing that. We're skimping on things that maybe otherwise, some school districts would not. And part of that's a model of our giving program that we're trying to get set up for those that support what we're trying to do. So it's a matter of just saying this is this opportunity. And we believe that the community, when they see the kids that we're trying to impact, I think they're going to come around us. We've been in contact with national um, foundations as well. And in fact, I've got a call, in a couple days with a large national foundation who's all about providing sports access to low-income kids. And so, because we're the first school like this in the country, it's opening a lot of doors for us that maybe otherwise wouldn't be open to other schools.
Mhm. So you know as well as I do that people listening to this, um, some folks are going to be like, "This is a great idea. I think this is great for my kid loves sports. I mean, these opportunities are great." You know full well there are other folks listening to this who are going to say, "This is ridiculous. This is not what school is about." Um, how do this school should be solely about academics, et cetera. How do you answer that pushback from people who don't see the same vision as you?
I want everybody, we aren't going to be the right school for everybody, right? Yesterday I was in a meeting with the Valley View School District with their deputy superintendent. And he and I were talking about what our school is doing. And I said, look, Joey, I said, our school is not going to be the right fit for every student. We know that. And that's okay. But I think that if a community member, let's say they're skeptical about sports in general or being a part of the educational ecosystem, right? And they're like, well, what we shouldn't be spending money on that. We should be spending money on academics. I would just point to a couple different statistics. Number one, we know that students who are enrolled in athletic programs have a lower dropout rate and have a lower and attend school at a higher rate than those that don't. That's a fact. We know that students who participate in sports have higher GPAs. And so this isn't an either or proposition. This is an and proposition. And the other thing is, if we're targeting these kids who maybe are disadvantaged, who already have higher levels of absenteeism, who already have levels of high school dropping out, who already have lower ISAT scores or NAEP scores or whatever the metric we're using, and we're providing them something that makes them want to stay at school and pushes them to improve themselves, then why wouldn't we want to support that? Like that is at the end of the day achieving our constitutional responsibility to have a system of public schools that is intended to, support our republic. And so we're just coming at it from a different direction, recognizing that interests and motivations for kids differ, and saying we're here for these kids who have kind of frankly been neglected and not being able to really do the thing that they love to do all the time. And we're saying, no, we're going to create a space for you to do that.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with former State Senator Brandon Durst. He is the chairman of Bribion Academy. It is the first charter school approved under a new law passed by the Idaho legislature this past year, and it's designed to encourage more school choice of options. So, Brandon, I want to talk about next some things that the Charter Commission, I believe, put in place when it comes to your approval for this. Now, the Charter Commission said you have to have a lease agreement on a building by March 1. Are you confident that you can secure that? And what happens if you can't secure a building or funding in time?
Yeah, so this is another great question. So we are very confident that we'll have a building. We hope to have a building before Thanksgiving, actually. And we're close to that point. We're exploring some different funding opportunities where we might end up being able to buy a building instead of having to lease a building. And we've had conversations in the last 3 days to help facilitate that. I'm having more conversations next week around that same issue. And we're very, very confident that's going to happen.
Hmm.
Um, and if it doesn't, then we go back to the Charter Commission. We already made a commitment in our presentation to them that, we wanted to, the phrase is put up or shut up, right? We said, give us the chance, let us prove ourselves. And that's what we're going to do. And I think that's emblematic of what we want to see from our faculty, from our administrators, from our student body, and from our parents. Put the target in front of them,
So
have them reach the goal, right? And that's what we
so
said.
where
Go ahead.
I was just going to, sorry for interrupting you. So, where exactly would the physical building be? Is there a certain part of the Treasure Valley you're looking at?
We're looking at kind of near the Canyon County, Ada County border, near the interstate. We're looking in the CWI area um,
Hmm.
for a lot of reasons. A lot of them, one of which being that the Idaho Center is there, the CWI is there, which will give access to better CTE programs for our high school once that's developed. And that's also the kind of location where students who are coming from Meridian or even West Boise can get to easily because it's opposite of traffic, and those who are coming from the west end of the valley can get to. And with the creation of Highway 16, easy access there. So, really trying to be someplace central so that students from
Hmm.
no matter where they are, the Treasure Valley can get to it, in a 30 to 45-minute drive. And because I don't want kids on a bus for a long time, that's terrible for them. And that's not good for parents to have their, commuting their kids back and forth. And so we want to be someplace that's very accessible for families from no matter where they're coming from.
So, let's talk about transportation because the commission also set a June 1 deadline to have a transportation plan and a budget. So, why should parents trust that you can secure those when they weren't in place at the time of approval? Because as you just mentioned, I mean, great central location, right? But transportation is critical because especially if, as you said, you're looking at hopefully 50% of your student body to be on, reduced or free lunch. It's going to be really difficult for parents and those economic guidelines to probably get their kids to and from school on their own.
Yeah. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is that's a great point. And one of the things we're trying to do is really not be disconnected from the community in which we seek to be located, right? And so a high Latino population, focusing on those students so that the demands on transportation are less, so they're shorter drives. The other There's a couple other things to keep in mind with what we're looking to do, and wouldn't have been nearly as feasible even 6 months ago. Uh, House Bill 394, and that I'm pretty sure that's the right bill citation, but if it's not, somebody can correct me later. Created a opportunity for schools to be able to purchase things other than big yellow buses for transportation and still be reimbursed for those costs. And so we're looking to utilize a hub and spoke model for our transportation program, where we meet kids at a location close to their neighborhood that is safe, like a library or a Boys and Girls Club or a
Hmm.
YMCA, that sort of a thing, and we can pick them up from there and then transport them directly to the school, so we don't have to have multiple stops, or we have very few stops along
Mm.
the way, so that we can get a broader reach with our transportation system. And because we can buy shuttle buses or vans or those sorts of things, which are ADA accessible, we can use those to be able to get to more places in a shorter time and to be able to have lower costs to be able to transport kids. And the other benefit to that is then we can then use those same vehicles to, do our sports. I remember being up north. One of the complaints that we have from a lot of the school districts in the northern part of the state is um, you have a golf team that has 5 kids on it, and the only way you can transport those kids is on a yellow bus. And you got to take an entire yellow bus to go 100 miles to go to Grangeville for a golf meet. Like, it doesn't really
Mm.
work. And so what we're doing is leveraging this new law to be able to maximize the reach of our transportation system and to limit the amount of time that a student has to be in our transportation to be able to get to and from school.
I want to talk next about financing because this was also part of some of the guidelines that were put in place for you to be able to move forward. And charter schools are publicly funded. So, can you walk us through exactly where your academy's money will come from and also how you'll be ensuring financial transparency?
Yeah, so I'll start with the last question first. I've already reached out to State Controller Brandon Wolf. We want to be one of the first school districts in the state to fully integrate into Transparent Idaho. We want patrons and taxpayers and the public in general to be able to see where every single dollar we have and see where it's being spent. I think that's critical. I think that government transparency is something that we have to really push. And the way you do that is leading by example. And so we want to be the guinea pigs in that. So to the extent that we're able to integrate as much as possible with them, we're going to. Um, as terms of our budget is concerned, um, about 85% of our budget comes um, from state revenue, right? So, I'm
Hmm.
just pulling up my budget right now. I can tell you exactly. So we're looking at about roughly about $3.6 million dollars in M&O state support. So that's through things like the salary-based apportionment and the and those sorts of mechanisms. There's also things that we get as a charter school. They're different, like we have charter school facilities, that's roughly $175,000. There are special appropriations the legislature has put together for different things like literacy intervention and things like that. We've got those sorts of things. We're also applying for grants. And then we have access to federal funds. And, that's as you've reported and is being reported elsewhere, that's a kind of that's a moving target right now as to what that looks like. Certainly
Hmm.
with our anticipated high ELL and low income populations, the impact on Title I funds will be, we don't know what that's going to look like exactly today, but we expect roughly between, roughly $500,000 in federal funds to help support us. One of the things that's going on that's a bit under the radar right now is the shift between just line item federal funds for things like title programs and those that are being shifted to charter school programs. And so
Hmm.
we may be the unintentional beneficiaries of those shifts to still support the programs to those same students that otherwise would be kind of less advantaged with with the reduction in title funds.
So I want to talk next about, as I mentioned, you want smaller class sizes. So as I said, you're wanting to see like a 15-to-1 ratio, right? So 15 students to every one adult. Your goal, though, is to have an enrollment of 475 students in the K through 8. So if you break that down, that's actually 52 students per grade. That's big. And even if you did 2 classes per grade, you're still at 26 students per grade. I think there could be a very good argument to be made that that is not small class size at all. So, how do you get to that 15-to-1 ratio? Are you looking then at like what two teachers per classroom? What does that look like?
Yeah, so that's one of the things about our program that's really unique, and we recognize as charter schools, we're the laboratory of innovation for public schools, right? That's the whole reason charter schools started in the first place. And so what we do is we take our cohorts, our grade levels, and right now we're capping our grade levels at 60 students per grade level. We'd like to see that closer to 50 for our K through 2 grades, just because a lot of little kids, so it's hard to manage for anybody. And I know that
That's a lot.
having a second grader and a 4-year old at home, that is hard. That is a first grader and a 4-year old at home, and coaching those age groups in soccer, it's a lot of work. And so what we do is we have our grade levels at those sizes, and then we also employ, in addition to our teacher of record, we also employ what we're calling teachers in training. And so this differs than a traditional paraprofessional that you might be familiar with at a regular school, right? Where they come in and provide support. What we're actually looking to do is have a grow your own model where we actually have individuals who would like to become teachers at some point in the future, but maybe haven't gone through the training programs to accomplish that yet. And we pay those people at a rate that's higher than the traditional paraprofessional, recognizing that they are moving into a professional role that is different. And then what we do is that we think is going to be great for teachers, because I really believe that we have to give teachers back the right to their own classroom. Um, is we tell teachers that they have these two aides that they're working with that are responsible for following the grading rubric, for responding to non privacy related emails, for doing bus duty, for doing lunchtime duty, for all those things that take teachers away from actually being able to teach and to assess, and allowing the teachers to focus on their craft and do the things that they were trained to do well, and letting them focus on those things, and letting these aides take over some of the more administrative tasks that are in the classroom today. So that way we can maximize their time. And what that does is it allows for less students to be in each classroom and to have more adults per student. I remember many, many years ago, I was at a board meeting for the Boise School District, and I spoke with then Superintendent Stan Olson after a meeting. And this is when there was a discussion in the Boise School District about, having a cap on class sizes. And,
Mm,
Superintendent Olson and I disagreed about that. And I said, Stan, class sizes do matter. You can't tell me that you can have 30 small little kids in a classroom with a single teacher, and that's a good learning environment, especially for kids who maybe struggle with attention or anything else. So, we're committed to that process. We're doing it in a different way, and we recognize that that's going to be uneasy for some people. Some people are gonna be like, "That's not going to work," and maybe it won't. But you know what? We won't know unless we try, and we're committed to putting things in place to help that out. And the other thing I'd point out is not only do we have those three adults in those classrooms, we also have a master teacher who oversees all those teachers too, that comes in and provides support as well. And so we've got a lot of layering that happens to provide mentoring and to provide structural support for those students, so that way we can identify when they're advancing and when they're slowing down to help them be able to grow and be able to continue to improve.
mm. So, Commissioner said that your estimate of enrolling 475 students to start was optimistic, and I have to say, just anecdotally, my youngest goes to a K through 8 private school. It's been around for 125 years, and they struggle to keep enrollment at 400, and they are considered a top private school. So, I think that's a fair argument that that's going to be tough. So, if your enrollment does not meet projections, do you move forward? Is there a financial risk to that? And if there is, how will that all fall out? I mean, do taxpayers, does your board deal with that financial risk? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's two pieces of that question that I should address. Number one is the fiduciary impact or the taxpayer impact is negligible or non-existent unless we meet the conditions of our charter approval,
Mm,
right? And so the first payment that we would be eligible to receive would be in July 1 of 2026. And so before that point, we aren't eligible for any state funds, and so the taxpayer's not on the hook for any of that. That's all giving that we're getting from foundations and from different things like that. So that's number one. Number two is in terms of the enrollment. We heard that comment, and I put my head down and laughed because unlike a private school, we're free, right? So we're providing this service to kids and to families for free. And it's a lot easier to induce demand when something doesn't cost anything than it does when it does cost something. And so um, we already know from the interests that we've already seen without doing any advertising whatsoever that we are going to fill, and we'll probably be at capacity, if not exceeding capacity, in year one. Um, and I say that with a lot of anecdotal and actual enrollment forms being submitted already. So
mm,
um, we will fill capacity. There's not another sports school in the area. Like there is, we are in a really, really, really unique niche, and because of that, like we're going to be able to fulfill our enrollment needs. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but it will be much less difficult than I think some people expect. I mean, Gemma, go around to Simplot Sports Complex, go to the Optimus Sports Complex, go to any one of these places where
mm-hmm.
sports are happening on the weekends and see how many thousands of kids are in those complexes every single weekend. I was at a park last night coaching my boys soccer team. There were over there were over, 10 teams practicing at that exact same time as our kids were. Like this is a sports driven community, and because of that, the interest and the demand for a sports type of school is ripe, and we believe that because we're doing this for free and because the program we're offering is so unique, we have no doubt that we're going to be able to fill our capacity. And when we do that, we'll show that this is a sustainable model and we won't leave taxpayers on the hook. Because as somebody who considers themselves pretty conservative on a lot of things, the last thing I want to do is put taxpayers at a place where they are left holding the bag for something that doesn't work.
Oh, we're continuing to talk with former State Senator Brandon Durst. We're talking about his upcoming new charter school, Brabant Academy. It would be the first charter school approved under a new law passed by the Idaho legislature. So, Brandon, Idaho has seen some pretty big debates around whether taxpayer funded charter schools could cross into religious instruction. And you've said on social media, and you did tell Idaho Education News that Brabant Academy could, and I'm quoting, morph into a Christian charter school. So, do you believe that would be legal under state law that says public schools have to be non-sectarian?
So let me start off with saying that our intention as it was presented to the Charter Commission is to remain a non-sectarian school under the conditions of our performance for certificate. Let me
Mhm.
caveat everything I say from here on out with that first statement. Um, Secondarily, I don't believe that it's constitutional to prevent a institution that is religious in nature from being able to offer um, a charter education. Um, the U.S. Supreme Court this last term kind of punted on that issue. That question has only been answered for one state in the country, and that's Oklahoma. Um,
Mhm.
I think what we're going to see, and I believe you guys have reported on this. I know it's been reported in other local media as well. There's already a direct challenge on the Blaine Amendment here in the state of Idaho that's happening at the
Mhm.
federal level. And that the way that that issue is resolved will provide a lot of illumination around where the court is headed in terms of that question. One of the things that's different about Idaho than Oklahoma is that we actually have precedent in the Ninth Circuit that speaks to um, the type of entity a public charter school is considered to be in the eyes of the law. And so there's a case from Arizona called Cavianus that basically talks about how public charter schools aren't actually governmental or public entities. And that's a unique distinction from what the that Oklahoma's in says. And so we do have a split circuit decision on this issue today. But as because Justice Coney Barrett recused herself on that case, we don't have a decision. And so I don't personally believe that the non-sectarian requirement is constitutional. I don't think it's enforceable. Certainly, the Charter Commission would be required to try to enforce that because they're bound by the law in the state. And until such time as a court of competent jurisdiction tells them otherwise, they have to do that. And I would respect that that's their requirement. Um, Whether this is resolved in Idaho through this school, some other school, or someplace else in the country, this issue will finally come to the Supreme Court and get final resolution because where we are right now, I think everyone, regardless of where they sit on this issue, recognizes it's an untenable position, and we do need clarity nationally to know what can and can't be done, and we don't have that today.
So, how do you assure taxpayers then that your academy it wouldn't be a backdoor for that agenda? And I ask that because we have private religious schools in Idaho. Yes, they're private. They're, I mean, you got to pay for them, but we have them. And so if parents really do want their children to have that, they do have that choice. And a lot of these schools do have full ride need-based tuition for students who can't afford it. So you are a public charter school. The laws as they stand right now say that this has to remain non-sectarian. So how do you assure taxpayers that you won't be trying to add something like religion to your academy?
So I think the biggest thing to look at is the nature of our performance certificate, which for those listeners that don't know how that works, when a charter school is approved, they have what's called a performance certificate, which basically is just the guidelines that the charter has to follow to be able to continue to be a charter. And a charter is basically just a contract, right? And so if we violate the terms of our performance certificate, then that's the same thing as breaching a contract, right? So then we lose the opportunity to continue to provide the service that we're providing, which is a public education or an education to students. And so that's where I would, if I was a skeptical taxpayer, that's where I would look to first, is there are a lot of built-in um, mechanisms that prevent that sort of thing from happening. And let's say, and I'm not gonna, I'm going to take Brabant out of the equation, but let's say some other school is approved either now, currently, or in the future, and they decide they want to, you know, become sectarian, right? They would have to ask the Public Charter Commission for the approval to do that. And then ostensibly the Charter Commission would say, no, you can't do that. That's a violation of Idaho code. And then the only way that could change is if there was a court of competent jurisdiction that agreed with the Charter Commission, or pardon me, they agreed with the charter school and said, yeah, actually they can do that. And then it would be able to be done. You can't really do it. The order is important. You can't change it without an approval. And because if you do that, you breach your contract. And so
Mm.
until your contract changes, you can't change the terms of the contract. So those are the kind of the procedural safeguards that are in place. And I can't tell you I can't honestly tell you what we're going to do. Right now, today, we are focused on putting together a non-sectarian school of sport that's focusing on the things that we're focusing on. We're very transparent about what our curriculum is and the things that we're going to be teaching our students. And so parents can choose whether or not that's the right fit for their students. And if they feel that it is, great, we welcome them. And if they don't, that's okay too. We're a school of choice. You don't have to come to our school. There's lots of other options in our area. But we recognize that those procedural safeguards exist, and I think that members of the community should have some comfort in those.
Would you try to change your charter at some point to make it a
Again,
more
that's
sectarian
yeah, I
school?
don't know, and that's the honest answer. I really don't know. I think we're going to watch this case that's happening in the Ninth Circuit right now around um, the applicability or even the germaneness of the Blaine Amendment we have in the Constitution. Um, It's my opinion. I put this on social media, so this isn't going to be news to anybody. I believe that Blaine Amendment is dead. I know that former Justice Jones disagrees with that. There's legal scholars on both sides of this issue that have a vehement disagreement about whether or not it is dead or not. The courts are going to make a decision on that, and when they do, I think that'll be really illuminating to us as to what the environment looks like from a legal standpoint.
What if you have a parent interested in coming to your school that's requesting religious-based curriculum or programming? Um, what are you going to tell them? Because right now, based on your contract, you have to remain a non-sectarian school.
So there's a couple things that are happening there. Number one, we actually have had parents, believe it or not, Gemma, we've actually had parents in the last 3 weeks ask to be able to enroll in our school, and they've also said they'd like to see religious education in our school. And what I've told them is that that's not an option for our school to be able to provide that religious education. We can't do that. It's a violation of our contract with the state. We can't do that. But what we will do, and this is already done by virtually every um, charter school and traditional public school in the state, is we're going to let parents take advantage of the release time statute that we have in the state, in the state code, to be able to give their students access during the school day to get that religious education um, being offered by somebody besides us. And so you're familiar
What
with.
what do you mean? So what do you mean by that? Is that like so they could pull their child out to get religious education during the actual school day, then bring them back, or something like
Yeah,
that?
so if you think about like our friends in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they've got seminary that their students go to during the
But
day,
it's
right? They
before
go.
school.
No, that's during the school day in most schools, in most school districts. That's during the school day. They leave during third period high school and they go to the seminary building for the period and they come back to school. It's the same thing. We have the evangelical community has something called Launchpad, where students can go
Mm.
through that and get a college credit and a high school credit for that class. Those things do exist, and it'd just be a matter of parents finding a location near our building that isn't
Mm.
considered school property and being able to have their kids go to that place to be able to provide that education to their students. So let's say they wanted to take a Bible class that wasn't literature or historical based, but was more and more of a evangelical or more of a kind of evangelism type tool. Like they would have to find someplace else for that course to take, but they'd be allowed to leave the building or leave our property to be able to do that. And that's already a part of state code. That's already permitted to happen. And we would be
Hmm.
more than willing to work with parents to make sure that they can.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds similar to if you can opt your children in or out of certain things, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, yes, we have that in public schools. I'm sure you've heard this, Brandon, but critics, a lot of folks, a lot of critics, very much point out your ties to the Idaho Freedom Foundation, and they say that your academy could be more about politics than students. How do you respond to a question like that?
So that's an interesting question. I don't know. That's a strange question to me. I think, and the reason is because it assumes a premise that I don't subscribe to. I've said this already here today, Gemma. I believe we have an education system to educate students, right? That's
Hmm.
why we have an education system. And I am creating a charter school to educate students. That's why it exists. Am I going to pretend like we don't have a worldview within our school? Absolutely, we do, right? I'm not hiding that, right? We again,
Hmm.
our curriculum is on our website. Every parent who's interested can come look and see what we're trying to do. We're not trying to shy away from who we are, but to say it's a political agenda, I don't think is a fair representation of our intention. Um, do we have a worldview? Yes. Do we have a belief that kids deserve a better education? Yes. Is that political? Maybe it is. Education is inherently political. I think, that's
Well,
just
I
when
think
I
it's
was going through my,
become political,
yeah.
right?
I mean, whether it's become political or has always been, I guess, is it could be a point of discussion. But even when I was going through my education specialist program at Boise State, sitting in the room with the rest of my cohort, we were talking every week about things that we were seeing on the news or they were experiencing in their buildings or whatever it was, that were impacting what was going on with these students and with the families. And so we're not going to pretend that politics doesn't exist. We're not going to pretend that families don't have a ideological investment on how their kids are being educated. And I think that
Hmm.
the great news is about having a school of choice is we're going to give access to parents who maybe feel today, wrongly or rightly, and look, I understand there's people that are going to disagree with this, and that's okay. But there are parents who feel disillusioned with the public school system. The data bears that out. There's plenty of polling here in Idaho and nationally that speak to that. Enrollment trends speak to that. We're trying to say, here's in a program that you can feel confident represents your worldview and isn't going to undermine the way and the value that you're trying to give to your kids. And so, if public education is going to be able to regain trust with a section of population that currently does not trust it, the way to do that is to encourage schools like ours to flourish. Because if we do, then we'll demonstrate that under the right circumstances, public education still works for all families, not just those that align with a specific agenda or not. And so that's what we're trying to do. And again, I recognize not everybody's going to buy into that, and that's okay. But we're just trying to provide another option for kids and for families who maybe feel disillusioned or disenfranchised by the
Hmm.
current system.
Well, Brendan, I really appreciate the conversation today and for you taking the time to talk to us about this. So, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks again for your time.
We've been speaking with former State Senator Brandon Durst. He is the chairman of Bribon Academy. It is the first charter school that's been approved under a new law passed by the Idaho legislature this past year that's designed to encourage more school choice options. And this would be what Brendan has called a school of sport. And that'll do it for this episode of Idaho Matters. Thanks so much for listening. And just a reminder, you can find all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts.